As the host of a horror podcast, I occasionally hear from people that horror films don't scare them. And I've always found that to be sort of interesting because there are plenty of horror films that scare me. So it sort of makes me wonder if maybe we're using the word scare or fear differently. And before I even try to clear up that distinction, I mean, look, I readily admit that there are horror films that are meant to just be fun or campy or gory, and then others that aim to be truly unnerving films that linger after the movie is over. It's the difference between Piranha 3D and Jaws. One of those two films fucked up an entire generation of people and made them never want to go into the ocean again. You want to guess which one it was? And so I'm referring to films like that. I'm saying I find it interesting that there is no film that aims to frighten you that actually does so. And look, I'll use words like fright, fear, terrify, scare, and although there's probably some important distinctions between those words, I'm going to use them interchangeably for our purposes because I actually don't think it's that complicated of a question. Look, like if we go out to a horror movie together, okay, should you be so lucky, if we do that and, after the movie we go out for a bite to eat, after the movie has sat for a little bit, and I ask you the question, did that film scare you? What I'm essentially asking you is, did it produce any negative emotions, things like anxiety or disgust, that stuck with you after the movie was over? Or were you able to just sort of leave it all at the cinema, like you walk out and there's nothing lingering, the movie didn't even put a stone in your shoe whatsoever? I think that's what I mean when I say, did that horror movie frighten you? Like, did it linger? Did it hit a fucking nerve somewhere with you? And it's just hard for me to believe that there are really people out there that fall into this category where nothing really scares them, given the way that I've just described being scared. Because let's think about it this way. Horror films reflect to a large extent our cultural anxieties. That's why we love them so much, right? They're cathartic to a large degree. That's why there's 905 zombie apocalypse shows on television right now, because it's therapeutic at this time in Western culture to envision a cultural tabula rasa, the droning in and out every day of our mechanical Monday through Friday work week. In those sorts of shows, they've been reduced to ash and the janitor can now become the hero. It's an anxiety that reflects a pushback against banality. That's what the zombie genre has become for us here. And fear is informative. We say that all the time in this podcast, right? I think it's safe to say that we all fear things. It's a pretty fucked up world out there, and there's a wide range of candidates of things that can cause us harm, whether that harm is physical or psychological, or if you're religious, spiritual, right? There's monsters out there. Right, so follow me here. The central ingredient for those things, for those fears, can be radically different from me to you. For example, if you watched or listened to this podcast at all, you'd know that I have significant anxiety surrounding familial horror films because I was intensely physically and psychologically abused growing up. Unfortunately, one of the other co-hosts of this podcast at a certain point in her life was raped. So you don't think that made her more susceptible to certain fears and anxieties in particular sorts of films? And this goes on. Losing a child, being manipulated by a lover, losing one's sense of agency or free will. Bitch, we're all scared of something. And what horror films allow us to do that's somewhat unique is it allows us to get just close enough to those terrible things in the world without actually being harmed by them, like being face to face with a lion, but behind plexiglass. Horror is an opportunity to see your trauma, your fears, played out in a narrative as a kind of roundabout exploration of issues that can be often difficult to acknowledge about oneself, or about one's past, or even one's future. So I don't know what to make of people who say that there are no horror films that scare them. I mean, maybe people who aren't scared of any horror films haven't had any significant trauma in their life. I mean, that sounds very presumptuous on my part and probably a little insensitive, so I don't want to hang my hat on that theory. I mean, perhaps that sort of person is maybe not as in tune with knowing him or herself as much as other people do. I mean, let's be honest, how many people do you know who take the time to introspect about the sort of person they are, about their faults and their vices and their anxieties? I mean, probably not many people. And that's not an indictment. I don't mean to make that sound like an indictment. One can hardly blame them. It's a luxury to philosophize and to introspect when you have mouths to feed, when you have a roof to keep over your head. So I get it. I totally get it. But I don't know, are you one of those people? I mean, if you are, enlighten me. I sincerely want to pick the brain of a person who doesn't find anything in the horror genre remotely terrifying. I mean, maybe it's the movies themselves, right? Like, especially American horror films. The vast majority of American horror films are prepackaged, regimented, and designed to make you just jump in particular intervals of time. And again, I don't even want to knock that entirely. I mean, sometimes it's fun to just take a bunch of friends out to a horror movie where there isn't much thought, you know, and the teenager gets the machete to the face. I mean, sometimes that's fun. I get it. It's like Jack in the Box, right? Shit ain't gourmet food, but if you're drunk and it's 2 a.m., it's a good option suddenly, you know? But the problem becomes when that becomes the standard. When the standard is Jack in the Box. When the genre itself becomes prepackaged and processed and deep fried and sold for 99 cents. Case in point, the Conjuring series. Oh my fucking God. The Conjuring series is literally the horror equivalent of Guy Fieri just sucking down a greasy burger in front of a camera crew. It's the glorification of shit. I'm ranting again. So look, one suggestion I would have, if traditionally American horror films don't scare you, is just to reach out to international horror films. This is a great time for non-US horror. A great example is probably my favorite horror film of last year, which was an Irish horror film called A Dark Song. Raw was also a French-Belgian horror film. One of the most unique zombie films I've seen came out this year, and it was a French film called The Night Eats the World. The South Koreans are killing it with films like The Wailing and A Tale of Two Sisters. There's just a lot out there that may challenge you if you fall into the category of, you know, traditionally Western horror films not doing it for you. But yeah, I've just had quite a few run-ins with people recently who just swear up and down that there aren't any horror films that scare them at all. Quite a different world than the one I live in, so I thought I would explore that with you. If you like this video, be sure to comment below, like, subscribe, hit that bell button. Let me know what you think. Are you one of those people? I don't get it. I don't get it. Help! Thanks for watching.